A U.S. service member sent a powerful message of protest by immolating himself on a live stream outside of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. on Sunday afternoon. Now, he's been identified as 25-year-old Aaron Bushnell, who died later that day from his injuries. While he was live streaming to Twitch, he said, quote, "I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit to genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at their hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." Bushnell then doused himself in a white liquid, set himself on fire, and then yelled, "Free Palestine," until he collapsed. Wow. Now, during this, one moment that stood out to me was a police officer pointing a gun at him as he was on fire. Because only in America, right? Now, as I mentioned, he later died of his injuries at a local hospital. Prior to this, Mr. Bushnell emailed a number of reporters, left-wing anarchist news websites, saying, "Today, I am planning to engage in an extreme act of protest against the genocide of the Palestinian people." So the reason that I'm giving you all this context, right, is because, as I'm going to mention, there are people saying, "Oh, we have no idea why he did this. We don't have a motive yet." Well, let me show you his final post on social media. He said, "Many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery, or the Jim Crow South, or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is, you're doing it right now." His last message, okay, this is, again, incredibly powerful. Taking your own life to protest what the Israeli government is doing with the money and weapons that we're sending them is nothing short of just absolutely incredible. I mean, look, when it comes to the October 7th attack, that was horrible, obviously. But since then, the reaction from the IDF has been so incredibly over the top. And that's an understatement. They have essentially flattened Gaza. Nearly 30,000 people are dead. Remember, half the population of that area are children, okay? And according to Palestinian health officials, about 1.9 million are displaced. That is nearly the entire population. About 85% of the population of Gaza can't go back to their homes. So Israel, the government has been rejecting ceasefires with the promises of getting back hostages. So far, in the previous ceasefire, Hamas has released 100 hostages, okay? And look, the IDF has even killed some of the hostages. The military said footage showed hostages had removed their shirts and one of them was waving a white flag. But apparently the Israeli military said, well, that must be a Hamas trick. We'll just mow them down. And that's exactly what happened. They were killed anyway, shot and killed, waving a white flag. Look, what's going on there is just nothing short of horrifying when you see the details. There needs to be peace. IDF bombings, they have to end. The hostages, of course, need to be released. And there needs to be a peace deal hammered out that both sides can live with and accept. Because right now, the status quo isn't working. Okay? The status quo is what led to October 7th. Even before that, Palestinians were dying in IDF raids. And of course, there were rocket attacks from Hamas. There were raids, there were attacks, there's retaliation for retaliation by both sides. And of course, it's never proportional when it comes to the amount of force that is used. The IDF, since they are bankrolled by US money and weapons, they're able to just launch the most devastating raids that end up giving so many Palestinian innocent civilians killed along with Hamas fighters. So, I mean, this is not at all proportional. And by the way, I don't want it to be proportional. I don't want any people to be killed on either side. I don't want Palestinians being killed. I don't want Jews being killed. Okay? I want the violence to end. It needs to stop. More violence is not going to solve this issue. The only thing that's going to solve it, in my opinion, is that the Palestinians are allowed autonomy to rule themselves in their own state next to Israel. Okay? And unfortunately, that is not going to happen as long as the right-wing government of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu are in charge. Because they are determined to commit a genocide. And they're being allowed to do so thanks to the United States that blocks Palestinian statehood. Okay? Now, here's the thing. A lot of mainstream media outlets, as I mentioned, are attempting to distract from the reason Bushnell did this. Okay? Either by outright ignoring it or saying, oh, well, the guy was just mentally ill. So let's go to the first one, right? And this is the mainstream media reporting on this. Men set himself on fire outside the embassy. U.S. Airman sets himself on fire. U.S. Airman, same thing. Active duty. Is there any explanation in the title of why he did this? No, not at all. Not at all. Others are pointing out, well, there was it must be a mental illness, and this is why he did this to himself. No, this was a pre-planned protest. And one of the reasons, by the way, that this is an active duty soldier saying, I will not be complicit in this, is because the Biden administration had deployed an Air Force team to Israel to assist with finding targets. That's according to documents obtained by The Intercept through a Freedom of Information Act request. So we are helping Israel to carry out the bombings of innocent civilians in Gaza. We are complicit. Our government is responsible for these deaths. Our money is being used. Understand that this is why Bushnell did this. This is not a case of mental illness. This is a case of a direct challenge to what the federal government under the Biden administration is doing in our name. And already, the majority of Americans want the Biden administration to push for peace. Many DNC staffers have sent anonymous letters saying that we need to end this war. We need to push for a ceasefire. And a Biden official has already resigned. And now we have this, one more piece, one more demonstration of how Americans are fed up with funding and supporting this, what's going on here. And by the way, this is not the first time. Did you know, before this, back in December, there was another protester that self-immolated in front of the Israeli consulate, this time in Georgia. Did we hear about this? No, nobody heard about it. It wasn't a live stream. And the mainstream media didn't report it. Yeah, there was no attention brought to this. And I wonder why that is. Because our government is supporting war crimes and genocide. And apparently the media doesn't want us to know about it. That said, with Bushnell, his final act was to light that up in smoke.